Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Shabbos Daf Kuf Gimel contains two Mishnayos. From the beginning of the Daf until the first Mishnah is occupied with a discussion of the halachas of binyan and makeh b'patish. The next Mishnah takes us to chayrish and zereah, plowing and planting. And the next Mishnah goes to writing, and that takes us to the end of the Daf. There is a common theme running throughout the Daf, which is a discussion of what happens when you intend to do a malacha and you didn't complete it. When are you chayev for that as violating the D'oraisa and when and not? And we will preview each section as we get to it. From the beginning of the Daf until the first Mishnah, we have three things going on. We're going to try to prove one of the sides in the machlokas we just learned and explain the next two phrases in the Mishnah. So we've seen a machlokas between Rav and Shmuel as to whether somebody who makes a hole in a chicken coop which lets in air, is that considered the malacha of binyan because you're building the chicken coop properly, or is it makeh b'patish because that's the final step to finish it off? So the Gemara brings a proof because the Mishnah had said that one of the malachos was hakodeach, somebody who drills. Now that usually means that he's drilling a hole in order to put something into it. If he's not just making a hole, that would be called noikev. So the Gemara says drilling a hole is not completed anything because he has to put something into it. So according to Shmuel, what's the malacha? It's not binyan because he holds that making a hole is not binyan, it's not building, and it's not makeh b'patish in this case because this hole's not finished. So it's a proof to Rav. It must be that Rav is right and making a hole is a malacha, and that malacha is baineh. So Gemara says no, lav dafka. It could be that here we're referring to a case where we didn't drill the hole with a hole maker. He drilled the hole with a long iron nail, and he hammered that in. That's how he made the hole, and therefore this is the end of the job. So it's makeh b'patish according to Shmuel. He's finished off the job. He wants to leave the nail there in order to hang things on. Now the Gemara has the next phrase in the Mishnah, which was zehakal. There's a rule that anything which you do, which is a malacha that is meant to be left that way, counts as a malacha on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, what are you including when you say this is the rule, zehakal? So the Gemara says, even if you didn't finish the job, you intend to continue, but for many people the job is finished. For example, somebody who has a block of wood, which is large enough to hold a hole, you can hollow out a hole the size of a kav, and you hollow out a hole the size of 3/4 of a kav, and then you took a break for the day. You plan to finish it, but many people would leave it that way, and therefore it counts as a malacha. Okay, third thing, the Mishnah says that somebody who hits a anvil with his hammer is a malacha also. Now the anvil is not the thing you're working on, it's just where you keep the hammer. So what's the point in that? What's the point in hitting the anvil and the hammer? What malacha is that? So Gemara has a few options here. First of all, Rabbi and Rav Yosef says that he's training his hand to hit he's practicing striking a targeted blow with his hammer. He's hitting it right. So the children of Rechava said they can't be, because learning how to do something is not a malacha. If you watch somebody perform a skilled task and you learn how to do it by watching him, so that's a malacha on Shabbos? For sure not. So then what's this all about? So the Gemara says, Abaye and Rav give a different shot, is that in the Mishkan, when they made thin sheets of gold, which would be used to plate the panels of the walls, to crush them, so they had to hammer those sheets out. So what they would do is that they would hit the gold 3 times, and then they would hit the anvil. Why did they do that? Because they didn't want the hammerhead to get misshapen, and that would make the gold not smooth. Rashi actually says that in his town, people still do that. Okay, now the Gemara proves that this is the case because there's a brisa. Rav Shimon Gamliel says that somebody who hits the hammer onto the anvil while he's working is a malacha, because in the Mishkan, when they flattened out the gold sheets, that's what they used to do. Okay, now we get to the next Mishnah. The Mishnah discusses the malachos now of plowing and planting. It's really out of order here because what the Mishnayos are doing is working through the malachos on the list in reverse order, but this one is near the beginning of the list. The reason it's here is because it also has no minimum size. So the Mishnah discusses a number of different ways that you can do an activity which counts as either plowing or planting or something else. And which malacha you are doing really depends on what your intent is, the Mishnah will say. The Gemara will explain why that is. Why does it depend on your intent? And the Gemara will also ask what is a very minimum amount for. So we define plowing as preparing ground for planting. Anything you do that improves the ground will be considered plowing. Anything that you do that improves the actual growth of a plant is counted as planting. So on the list we have as follows. First of all, if you plow the ground, obviously that's plowing, and that's any amount. If you weed, you take out the weeds, or you cut off the dead branches of a tree, or you cut off shoots that are growing out from a tree, also any amount. The malach of plowing and planting both do not have a minimum size. Now, let's say you're cutting wood off a tree. So it depends what your intent is. That determines which malacha you're doing, which determines what the minimum size is. If you're intending to improve the tree, or you're intending to improve the ground around the tree, it's any amount. That's plowing and planting. If, however, you want firewood, so the minimum size for that is enough wood to fuel a fire to cook a concise of a chicken egg. If you're gathering up grass, meaning you're uprooting the grass, so again, if you want to improve the soil, then it's any amount. If you want to feed it to an animal, then it's the minimum size for that, which is a mouthful of goat. Okay, so the Gemara asks, you said there's no minimum size for plowing. What exactly are you going to do with a tiny piece of ground that you plow? So the Gemara says it's not a problem. You could plant a seed of a pumpkin. In the Mishnah, in the Mishkan, we even find that they would sometimes plant one tiny seed in order to grow something to make the dyes for the cloth. The Mishnah had said that which malacha you are performing depends on what your intent is, and therefore the minimum size depends on your intent. The Gemara now brings a brisa which will elaborate on that. The brisa says if you happen to be picking ulshin are endives, or you're cutting reeds out of the ground, so then there's 4 possible malachas you might intend to do. If it's for human consumption, you want to eat it, so then the minimum size is the size of a dried fig. If it's for an animal, then it's the mouthful that you feed to a goat. If it's for firewood, so then it's enough to cook a concise of a chicken egg. And if it's in order to improve the ground, then it's for any amount. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. All these things improve the ground. Who cares what your intention is? Either way, you're doing the malacha of improving the soil. So you're doing clay reish anyway. So Gemara has 2 explanations of this. Rabbi and Rav Yosef say you're right. We're talking about a situation where where it's not possible to plant there. It's not a field. It's some swampy area. It's an agam, and therefore that improving the ground there is not a thing. Abaye says no. We are following the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who says that it's Eidem Miskaven. You do not intend to improve the ground. Since you don't intend to improve the ground, it doesn't count. It's not a malacha. So the Gemara asks, what do you mean? But it's a psik reisha. You're for sure improving the ground. So what does it help you didn't intend? We know that even if Shimon agrees, when you do not intend, but it's definitely going to happen, that you still violate the Yisr. So the Gemara says where it's not your land, it's somebody else's land, and therefore it's called a psik reisha d'lo nechla. You don't care. You're not interested in whether you improve the land or not, and this is the source of a machlokes rishonim as to whether a psik reisha d'lo nechla is mutter or it's still aser derabanan. This is where it is, and now we get to the next Mishnah. This Mishnah is devoted to the halachas of writing, which we have seen is a minimum of 2 letters. The Gemara has 4 discussions here. The Gemara, first of all, will try to define the normal manner of writing as opposed to an abnormal, which wouldn't be an Isser D'Oraisa. And then we get to a similar discussion as earlier. What happens if you didn't complete your malacha? You intended to write a longer word or sentence, instead you wrote a shorter one. On that, we have an opinion in the Mishnah, which contradicts a similar opinion in the Brisa. It's a long Brisa. After resolving that contradiction, we'll analyze the Brisa itself. And then we'll get into a discussion as to whether final letters and regular letters are interchangeable, which has a couple of different areas of halacha in which it is relevant. So first of all, the Mishnah, which has 3 opinions about the malacha of writing. Everybody agrees that you have to make a mark of some sort. Rav Yossi says any scratch, any mark, any indicator doesn't have to be a character, a letter, or a number, doesn't have to be any of those, is an isser of writing, because writing in the Mishkan was used when they marked the krushim, the panel, so that they would know which ones to put together with which. So that could have just been a mark. It didn't have to be a letter. However, the Tanakama says it does have to be a letter. It has to be actually two letters. It could be two of the same letter. It could be different letters. It could be different inks. It could be different languages, whatever it is, but it's got to be two letters even of the same. And Rabbi Yehuda says it's got to be at least a word of some sort. It could be a short word which is part of a longer word, and he intended to write the longer word. Like, for example, if he wanted to write Shimon or Shmuel and he just wrote Shem. If he wanted to write Nachor and he just wrote Noach. He wanted to write Daniel and he wrote Dun, or I wanted to write Gadiel, and he just wrote the first two letters, which is Gad. Any of these count because what he wrote is a word in the long run. Now, the Tanakama also said it doesn't matter which hand he wrote with, the left hand or the right hand. So right away, the Gemara asks, how could that be? If you write with the left hand, it's not the normal way of writing. It shouldn't be an Isser Deraisa. So the Gemara tries a few answers here. Rabbi Yirmiyah says it was a lefty. So then the Gemara asks right away, so then when he wrote with his right hand, he wasn't chayiv Isser Deraisa. So the Gemara says he was ambidextrous, meaning he was stronger in one hand than the other, but since he could partially write with the other hand, it counts as writing as well. And the Gemara has somebody named Rav Yaakov, the son of the daughter of Yaakov. His father's name is not mentioned because apparently he was a Rasha. He says that opinion is Rabbi Yossi, who says you just have to make a mark. So if you just have to make a mark, it doesn't matter which hand you use. It's not considered to be a not normal way of making a mark if you use the wrong hands. The Gemara says, what do you mean? Rabbi Yossi appears later in the Mishnah. How could that be Rabbi Yossi? The Gemara says, no, the whole Mishnah is Rabbi Yossi, they just didn't mention his name until further. Gemara now has a steer between Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah and Rabbi Yehuda in a Brisa. It's going to be a very long Brisa. We'll answer the stira and then analyze the Brisa step by step. First of all, Rabbi Yehuda had said that if you write a small name, which is part of a longer name, that's also a malacha. But in all the examples he gave, the two letters that were written were not the same letters. So the Gemara says it seems to be that's what Rabbi Yehuda holds, that they have to be two non-identical letters. Like if you wrote Aleph Aleph from a longer word, that wouldn't count as a malacha. So the Gemara shows that we have a Brisa which does not show that way. And the Brisa has four opinions as to how to explain a pasuk describing a malacha, which has as follows. It says, V'asa me'achas mehino. Now, V'asa sounds like anything that he does, even if it's not a complete malacha. Me'achas sounds like it has to be one. It has to be a one whole malacha. And then there's Mehena, which is only explained according to one opinion. So the Gemara wants to know, how do you explain this? Does he have to do a whole malacha, or does he not have to do a whole malacha? Which is it? So the Gemara has four explanations to this, and the Gemara's and this Brisa applies it to the halacha of writing. And first we have the Tanakama. He says that as far as writing, it has to be a short word which is part of a longer word, and he brings examples that Rabbi Yehuda brought in the Mishnah, Nayach of Nachor, Shem of Shimon or Shmuel, Dun from Daniel, or Gad from Gadiel. Now, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is next, and here he says differently than he said in the Mishnah. He says, even if it's the same letter repeated, like Sheish, Teis, Ror, Kach, or Chach, these are all words, not names, but they can be part of longer words. Third opinion is Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says, like he said in the Mishnah, that if he just makes a mark, that's enough. It doesn't have to be a letter. The fourth opinion here is Rabbi Shimon. He runs through the entire drasha again, and he says that what it teaches us is that you have to do a malacha which lasts. That somebody out there keeps this as a final malacha. The Gemara is going to ask, how is Rabbi Shimon different than Rabbi Yehuda's opinion? And the last opinion we have here is Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi has an entirely different drasha altogether. He has Va'asa me'achas mehena, and he says that you have four drashas here. The Gemara will explain it soon, but the point is that sometimes you could do a lot of malachas and bring one korban chatas, and sometimes you have to bring a separate korban chatas for each one. So first, the Gemara focuses on the kasha it meant to ask that here, Rabbi Yehuda says that even if you wrote two letters the same as part of a long word, you're chayev in a sederaisa, as opposed to in our Mishnah where he seemed to say that it's two separate words. So the Gemara says yes, his own opinion is like the Mishnah has to be two separate letters, not two separate words, two separate letters. And here, in this Brisa, he's quoting his Rabbi Gamliel, who says that it's enough even if it's only the same letter repeated, but it forms part of a longer word. Okay, now the Gemara continues to analyze the Brisa itself, and first of all we ask that Rabbi Shimon is the same as Rabbi Yehuda. What's the difference? They both say you have to do something which lasts according to somebody. So the Gemara says, first of all, maybe you'll tell me that Reb Shimon is referring to a situation in which the letters you wrote are not even part of any word. Like you wrote Aleph Aleph. Aleph Aleph is not a word, but it's part of a longer word, Azercha. So it's not a word, but it is written sometimes. When do you find Aleph Aleph written together? When people write kameyas, certain magical amulets, so they fill it up with all kinds of words and letter combination. So you'll find an Aleph Aleph there. So maybe Rabbi Shimon holds that you're chayav for that, and Rabbi Yehuda holds you're not. It has to be an actual word. So the Gemara says, well, that can't be the pshat because you have a brisa where Rabbi Shimon says you have to do a complete malacha to be a chayav. That brisa, the Tanakama, argues on Rabbi Shimon, and he says any amount that you drill is chayav, any amount that you smooth is chayav, any amount that you tan hide is chayav, any amount that you draw a design on a clear chayav, and Rabbi Shimon says no, it has to be a full job, a full drilling, a full scraping, a full tanning, a full designing. So it's not correct to say that Rabbi Shimon holds that it's fine if he just writes two letters. So the Gemara says no, Rabbi Shimon is saying the opposite. He's saying you have to do the entire full thing, just like he said in the brisa. So what do you mean? How could that fit with what he said? He had said that it says achas, it says asa, it's contradiction, and therefore we come up with a middle level. So how are you saying that he says you have to that you have to complete the work? So the Gemara reinterprets Reb Shimon's drasha here. The Gemara says it's not what he says. He says he just says the drasha of achas. He doesn't say asa at all. He says you might think that you're chayiv if you do part of work. Therefore it says achas, you have to do a full one complete job. Okay, now the Gemara explains Rav Yossi's opinion. It's Rav Yossi bar Rabbi Chanina explaining it. He had said that it's about bringing lots of chata'os for lots of malachos or one for all. And he explains that his drush is actually quite lengthy, and he has four separate drushes here. The words are v'aso me achas mehena. So he says, first of all, the two mems are extra, me achas mehena. Those are two separate drushes. And second of all, achas and hena are linked. You have an achas which is a hena and a hena which is an achas. So the mem of achas is to tell you don't have to finish the job. It's mei achas, part of one. The mem of mei hena is to tell you don't have to do avos. You could even do toldos. It's like of the avos malachos, you do toldos. And the achas shehi hena and the hena shehi achas, what is that? That sometimes you'll do many malachos, but the reason why you perform them all is because you forgot that Shabbos, you only made one mistake, so you only bring one in carbon chatos, and sometimes you knew it was Shabbos and you forgot each malacha, and therefore you have a bunch of separate mistakes, and therefore you have to bring a separate carbon for each of them. Okay, now we go back to the Mishnah. We have a new subject here, and that is, can you interchange an ending letter or a non-ending letter? There are several letters in the Hebrew alphabet which change, they have a different shape when they're the last letter in the word. So the question is, can you interchange them? And the Gemara says, well, look at what Rabbi Yehuda said. He said if you write Shem from the word Shimon, then that counts as writing the name. But how could that be? Shem ends with an ending letter, and Shimon doesn't end with an ending letter. The mem in Shimon is a middle letter, and the mem in Shem is an ending letter. So Gemara says that this tells us that they're interchangeable, and it's a very important halacha. If you write a Sefer Torah, Tefillin, Mezuzah, and you write an ending letter instead of a middle letter, so it's okay. It's not a problem. So the Gemara says right away, this can't be, because you have a brisa that says the opposite. It learns from the word uchesav tam, you should write them. It says that you should do ksav tam, you should do a perfect writing. You should not have mistakes in your Sefer Torah, Tefillin, or Mezuzahs. And therefore, it lists the following things you should be careful not to confuse. You shouldn't mix up an ayin and an aleph, or an aleph and an ayin. You shouldn't make up a beis and a chaf, or a chaf and a beis. A gimel and a tzadi, or tzadi and a gimel. A resh and a dalid, or vice versa. You shouldn't have a hey and a ches, or vice versa. A vav and a yud, or vice versa. Zayin and a nun, or vice versa. A tes and a pei, or vice versa, or a straight letter or a bent letter. That refers to the middle type letters or the ending type letters, like a nun and an ending nun, a tzadi and an ending tzadi, a fei and an ending fei. All these things you shouldn't have. And also, you should not mix up a closed letter and an open letter. That's a mem in the middle of a word and a mem at the end of the word. Now, other mistakes you shouldn't make are you should not end a paragraph where it shouldn't be ended, or neglect to end one where it should. You shouldn't write it like Az Yashir if it's not supposed to be, which is a different style. It's written like bricks, and you shouldn't write a Zoshir like the rest of the Torah. Also, you shouldn't write the name of Hashem in ink made from gold. That's the wrong thing to use. Any of these mistakes, though, where you wrote the letters right, you just wrote it in the wrong shape, in the wrong order, so that you can't just fix. You can't scratch them out and fix. You have to put it in Geniza. You have to hide it away. Anyway, what we see over here clearly is that if you write ending letters or closed letters where you're not supposed to, or vice versa, it's not kosher. So how could we say that they are interchangeable? So the Gemara says, well, there's a brisa that argues with this one that you just brought. This brisa, you're right, doesn't fit with what we just said, but there's another brisa that does. And this brisa says as follows. On the korbanos of Sukkot, there was nesachim. And usually it says viniskah. On each one it says, and it's nesachim. It's wine pourings or water. But there are 3 times where there's an extra letter in the word viniska. Once it says viniskehem, adds a mem. Once it says unsacheha, adds a yud. And once it says kimishpatam, and it adds an extra mem. That's not in nesachim, that's in the word kamishpat, it adds kamishpatam. So you see, 2 extra mems and extra yod. The Gemara, this brisa says this is a remez, this is a hint that there's supposed to be water pouring on a sukkah because you have mem, yod mem, and you have mayim. The problem is that both those mems that are extra were closed mems. They were last letter mems. They were ending mems. But the word mayim has an early letter mem. Obviously, this brisa holds that they're interchangeable. Okay, the Gemara is not finished. There's a long discussion on this, but that will run deep into the next daf, and therefore we'll save it for it.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.